Wallace. So this retreat, to which we're gradually approaching the end, has been quite clearly embedded in kind of a Buddhist context. You knew that before you came. In terms of Buddhist worldview and meditation, a way of life, which is really the only way to teach Mahāmudrā. There's no such thing as secular Mahāmudrā. That would be silly. Wouldn't mean anything. It would just be, well, I don't know, wouldn't be anything. And so it's really wonderful just to be able to immerse oneself into a thorough integration of a way of viewing reality, a way of practicing, a way of leading one's life that has three elements in profound integration. One of these is the pursuit of happiness, which all beings share. Another one is the pursuit of virtue, which many beings share, to seek to be a better person or better people. And then the third, the pursuit of understanding, knowledge, which many people share. And in the modern context, the discipline that has been clearly the most successful in the latter is science, of course, the pursuit of knowledge, and they provided us with an enormous amount of knowledge. But these three pursuits in modernity, contrary to the medieval period, and Renate can correct me if you think I'm wrong, she's more of an expert than I am, but in contrast to the medieval period, these three pursuits of happiness and virtue and knowledge, understanding of reality, in the modern world these are seen as quite independent, having nothing to do with each other. I think that's my impression. Completely just disintegrated. And that is, I've had the good fortune, and that's all it is. I've had the tremendously good fortune to be able to study and teach in superb institutions of higher learning. Amherst College, it was just a jewel of a college. Could never have gotten in if they had not given me a full scholarship. And so there I had the opportunity to just meet extremely bright professors and students. And in various fields. I studied philosophy, I studied science, I studied religious studies, history of science, and so on. And then I had the good fortune again to have full scholarship at Stanford, and so once again met a lot of bright people. What I found, and there was an article just recently, I think in the New York Times, why intelligent people aren't more happy. There seems to be no correlation. There's not a criticism of anyone, it just seems to be there's no correlation between being exceptionally bright and knowledgeable and being happy. I haven't seen any at all, generally speaking. That is in Western academia, Western civilization, modern civilization. No connection. I've known a lot of happy people. Haven't we all? Known a lot of happy people. But many of them have no interest in virtue, they're just having a really good time. You know? And no interest in the pursuit of knowledge because they're having a really good time. You know. And then, growing up in a Christian family and knowing missionaries are all over my family tree, like fruit just dropping to the ground. A lot of people devoted to virtue. And I say that with respect. Whether as missionaries, whether as social workers, as school teachers, as nurses, doctors, and so forth. Haven't found them to be exceptionally happy. Lots of burnout. Lots and lots of burnout. Sometimes happy, but generally not so much. In the medieval period, the pursuit of happiness was really, they understood, the wisdom tradition, people like St. Thomas Aquinas, they understood, well, happiness, it's really about a eudaimonia. Eudaimonia, genuine happiness. Well, if we go right back to Aristotle, you cannot conceive of or pursue eudaimonia, which is genuine happiness, without virtue. That's not possible. And the highest virtue is knowing reality. And so the pursuit of knowledge, pursuit of virtue, pursuit of happiness were completely integrated. And that was true from the time of Aristotle and right through the medieval scholastic era. Would you think that's a safe generalization? Okay. I'm glad, yeah. So Renate gives me a thumbs up here. And then along came modernity, Martin Luther, Galileo, Columbus, and so on. And they did something quite wonderful. They shattered the relative stagnancy, the complacency, the sense that we're through, which was rather common among academics in the early 17th century, late 16th century. That we have the Bible, and that's God's own word, doesn't get any better than that, and we have Aristotle, the philosopher, and then, but the philosopher. And then Thomas Aquinas integrated these two, and it's just a masterpiece of staggering brilliance. Of course, because Aristotle wasn't a Christian. And so to integrate his view with Christian theology was quite a masterpiece. It took great ingenuity. But then it seemed to be complete and whole, and then if it's complete and whole, it doesn't have to move. And people like Galileo and Luther and others shattered that complacency. And they shattered the integration. And so natural philosophy struck out on its own and became science. And religion, rather than including the quest for knowledge, which was very much part of the early Christian tradition, right, became a matter of faith and belief and obedience and virtue, to be sure. And the pursuit of happiness became more and more hedonic. So now we're living in a disintegrated world. We fell apart. And then we shared our disintegration with the rest of the world. And so here we are. So we all know that it's difficult in this world to maintain emotional equilibrium, emotional balance. It's hard for everybody. And for those of you who know my work, even peripherally, you'll know that I'm kind of championing a model of mental health and well-being based on the 4 types of balance: attentional, cognitive, attentional, cognitive, and then finally emotional. And so I'd just like to briefly address this before we return to the third of the 4 immeasurables, and that is emotional balance. There's excellent work done in this field by affective psychologists such as Paul Ekman, of course, and others. A lot of wisdom to be found in philosophy, a lot of wisdom to be found in multiple religious traditions around the world. So nobody has any monopoly on this. When I presented in my standard model of too much, too little, and dysfunctional, having an emotional hyperactivity disorder is being just overly emotionally sensitive, overly reactive, overly hyper-emotional. So one's always flying off the handle, extremely sensitive, lacking stability, not grounded. Emotionally deficit is just being dead within, out of touch with one's emotions. And then there are dysfunctional emotions, which are just entirely inappropriate and harmful to the situation. So when addressing with the issue, this enormously important issue that many people are interested in, now that we have a term emotional intelligence and corresponding to this emotional balance, then in terms of practices for that, there's some, again, very good ideas, theories, and interventions from modern psychology, which are, I think, many of them incorporated in the Cultivating Emotional Balance program that Paul Ekman and I devised. And what I contribute from the Buddhist side, of course, is the 4 immeasurables. And that may seem a little bit out of place. I would certainly bear criticism for doing that. It's emotional balance. Well, the first type of the 4 balances is cognitive, right? But I've put the 4 immeasurables over there in the category of emotional. And so if we had a really good debater, I'd say, hey, Wallace, what's up with that? You've said loving kindness is aspirational. It's not an emotion. And you said compassion is not an emotion, it's an aspiration. It should be cognitive. I just got to beat myself up. Well, at least empathetic joy is an emotion. Equanimity, not so sure. But empathetic joy is definitely an emotion. It's not an aspiration. Simply taking delight in. A la Buddhaghosa. When you come over to the Indo-Tibetan tradition, even the third immeasurable winds up being an aspiration, right? Just that. May all sentient beings never be parted from happiness devoid of suffering. So they make it aspirations all the way through. The 4th one is also an aspiration. So then it's sa. I get clobbered in every single one. Oh, I hate when that happens. But what I want to get at before we go to the meditation, which would be very simple, is that while all four immeasurables can be construed as cognitive, sure, and at least two out of four, I'll come back to a metaphor given a lot because I think it's simple and it's straightforward, and that is a cup of water, in this case tea, and drop a candy or stone in it. I won't, but you know what would happen. Drop a stone in a cup of water. And if you were a little gnat on the surface, trying to escape from the water, and somebody dropped a stone in that cup, that would be the end of the world as you know it. Really, seriously, that would probably be it. This massive tsunami, a quarter of an inch high would come, and you'd be dead. And if there are other little gnats, maybe it's a community of gnats, kind of swimming around the surface. It's mass murder, one stone. So it's a big deal. For the equilibrium within the cup, that's one stone is a big deal. It really totally upsets the balance. Take the same liquid, put it into a swimming pool, drop the same stone, hardly makes a ripple. Take the same liquid, put it into a pond, a lake, or an ocean, and drop the same pebble, and even the ripple is hardly even noticeable. Right? But it's the same liquid and the same stone. Okay, the metaphor is very straightforward. We are deeply habituated, I am, and I think other people are, habituated to really having thoughts and emotions and desires and memories and anticipations and all of that mental activity really like bees swirling around a hive. Swirling around, I me mine, I me mine, I me mine, I me mine, I me mine. Just as you are observing the thoughts that are arising throughout the course of the day, just see how often I me mine comes up, as opposed to one other person, that other person, or all sentient beings and so on. I me mine tends to figure pretty prominently. And the I me mine is one cup. And in that little world, for what we attend to is reality, if what I'm attending to, and which is to say very much what I'm thinking about and focusing on and hoping and fearing about, if that's all really fundamentally about me and mine, me and mine, me and my family, me and my possessions, me and my student, me and my projects, and so forth, I me mine. And then adversity strikes, in other words, life happens. Then, big deal. Then, I'm blown away. I can't meditate today. I just got this email. It's just, such a bummer. Such a bummer. Somebody criticized me. He said he quoted somebody else and said, this undermines Wallace's work. Oh, my whole work is undermined because somebody said something. Bummer. They should never do that. They shouldn't be allowed to do that. Nobody should be allowed to do that because I'm right. This really pisses me off. I'm going to have to write a letter of retaliation. I'm going to meet him in person, call him down. Okay, corral. I have to win. Nagyel, pride means I win. Yeah? I win, nagyel. So it's a big deal when adversity, like criticism or any kind of adversity, comes and falls in the little tiny cup of I me mine. How can we, but then that means emotional balance will never happen. You'll never have it. Doesn't matter how long you live, doesn't matter where you go. Adversity will still come, whether from outside or inside your health, and so forth and so on. So the fourth type of balance will never happen. Just because reality was not designed to be user-friendly. It's just what happens in the world. Just kind of starting with aging, sickness, and death, that doesn't turn out too well. But all the things along the course, it's just peppered with adversity. And so emotional balance, emotional equilibrium will just never happen. So then what can be done? And that is get a bigger cup. Trade in your cup for a swimming pool. If you get a swimming pool, trade it in for a lake. Get a lake, trade it in for an ocean. And how can we do that? Very practically. By attending to those around us. In their sorrows, their disappointments, their fears, their pains, their struggles, their adversities, and attending closely. That's all it is. Attending closely. With your heart and your mind, with your eyes and your wisdom, attend closely. And what happens is just, like it's inevitable. If you really attend closely to somebody else's suffering, you feel it. And you can't help but care. In which case, your cup just grew bigger. And so this is where empathy comes in, and where compassion starts to break down barriers, not just for me and my family, my group, and so forth and so on. The barriers start to break down as we attend to the media, and we see the latest catastrophe, the latest bombing, the latest earthquake, the latest political catastrophe, and so forth. Economic hardships, so many. And attending and lingering and let it be real, let it be real. And every time you do that, the heart gets larger. The space of the mind gets larger. Right? But of course that can be overwhelming. We all know that. And then that feeling of helplessness and so forth. And so to balance that and go out of one's way, since we're being force-fed the news of adversity of the world. We're getting that. If you read any of the media, you're going to get that every single day. So then we have to be more attentive, turn on the search machine, to attend to the joys of others. The joys of others. And these are to be attended to, and by attending to them, they become real. It's very simple. If you attend to something that doesn't exist, and attend to it in a sustained fashion, it will appear real to you. Right? It's just the way it is. And so, all the more if you attend to something that is real, well, let that appear to you, be taken in as real. And so attending to the joys of others. And every time you do that, if you attend closely, attending to a little child on that one little, what do you call it? Child thing in the park. Have you seen it? It's kind of like a little slide. Have you seen it? Right on the left side when you're walking up towards the village, look down where that little kind of quasi-cutie-pootie little soccer field is, with kids. And just this side of it is, I don't even call it, but it's kids like park thing. They get to play. Playground, except for it's just one thing. And I saw one boy with his mother sitting on the bench, and he's going up and he's playing by himself, sliding down. But, he's having a good time. And it's peaceful, and his mother's relaxed. There's a really simple little park there. It's one boy, one mom, one little boy having a good time. That's what I saw yesterday. Attend to it. Let it become real. The boy was safe. Didn't have to worry about landmines or kidnappers or cell phones. Attending to, letting no innocent pleasure slip by unnoticed and unappreciated. The only time we don't take delight in is malicious pleasure. Something is, unhealthy, unwholesome. But everything else, grist for the mill. So to be attending to it, people enjoying a meal, people enjoying a walk, people enjoying pleasant conversation, children enjoying riding a bicycle along the street, and the mother watching them carefully. A man enjoying walking his dog. A woman enjoying tending to her garden. So many little things. Then your heart gets bigger. It goes from a cup to a swimming pool to a lake to an ocean, as we attend to. And not only attending to the joy, but also wherever there's anyone who's cultivating the causes of joy, the causes of happiness. And in short, we can call that virtue. It's good enough. Virtue is a cause of joy. That's to be delighted in. And whatever their worldview is, their political affiliation, nationality, and so forth and so on. If they're applying themselves to virtue, then time to attend, time to take delight, time to rejoice that we're not alone in trying to bring something good to the world. Just a very brief allusion to later on when we come to Mahāmudrā, Maha, all of the great loving kindness and so forth. We know that, as I said before, and we will return to those next week, But from the perspective of Rigpa, I think that's the only, as I said before, I think that's the only perspective from which this type of resolve actually makes sense, right? Because it does say, I and I alone. It does say that. I, big emphasis on that first person singular. I take upon myself the responsibility of releasing, bringing all sentient beings to happiness. Okay, well, clearly, unless you want to just go into crazy land, that is valid only from one perspective, Buddha nature, where you don't need to have a team of Buddhas getting together. Because there's one for all and all for one. What one Buddha does, all the other Buddhas do. What all the Buddhas do, one Buddha does. And nevertheless, your role is significant. So from that perspective, from that transcendent perspective, which is non-local and even outside the context of time, then from that perspective, that one alone, perspective of Dharmakaya, then to make that resolve, I shall bring all sentient beings to happiness and its causes, release all sentient beings from suffering and the causes. It makes good sense. But as long as we're operating where we normally operate, that is most of us anyway, from the perspective of sentient beings, with limited lifespans, very, very limited abilities, very local, very brief lives, and having defects, mental afflictions and so forth, limited in our capacity to be of service. As long as we're viewing other sentient beings, the needs of the world, from the perspective of being a sentient being, then there's clearly really only one hope. And that is, can we transform this world so that economies are sustainable, the environment is sustainable, that we're nurturing other species rather than wiping them out, that we're caring for the atmosphere rather than polluting it to death, and overall caring for the natural habitat, caring for other species, caring for each other, and giving our most brilliant minds the task of seeing how can we live in harmony in the midst of all the diversity of worldviews, ethnicities, and so forth and so on. There's so much intelligence here. There should be a way. For Israelis and Palestinians, for blacks and whites, for Chinese and Tibetans, and the list goes on and on and on. There should be a way, really. This isn't inconceivable. And so, putting our minds to this. So, from the perspective of sentient beings, I think there's really only one hope. And it's collaboration. It's collaboration. It's finding people with shared vision, shared heart, shared motivation, and then working together and networking, working together, sharing vision, encouraging each other, kind of sangha, a sangha of restoring the balance in the planet, serving humanity and all the sentient beings on the planet. And it's really embracing the notion of sangha beyond all ideological barriers, and divisions, breaking down barriers. And then, with that vision, then I think there's really hope. There's so much intelligence. The problems are enormous, but by and large, we created them. That's the good side of global warming. That it's not just inexorable forces of nature that are going to, torch us. Actually, we created it. But if we create it, then we could be able to stop doing it. If it's just a force of nature, like solar flares, torches, or the sun's going supernova, don't worry about it. Or big asteroid coming, if you worry about it, it doesn't help. There's nothing we can do. But insofar as a catastrophe is taking place in the environment, were brought about by humans, in a way that's the best news possible. Because that means we created it, we can undo it. In principle, we just need to be intelligent enough and have the motivation. So there it is. So empathetic joy. Have a heart like an ocean. That's it. Have a heart like an ocean. And then emotional balance will come for free. Okay, let's meditate. In the teachings during the afternoon, sometimes they're very gnarly. That is, for example, trying to distinguish between the object of reputation of these tantric Madhyamikas and the Prasangika. It's so easy. Anna can help you. I'm too stupid. Glenn can help you. I studied it 30 years ago and I forgot. That's difficult. This is not difficult. It's not difficult. So, the marching orders as you're setting out on the highway up to the great city of Mahayana. Keep your eyes open. Keep your eyes open. You know, it's by the way, everybody listening by podcast, it's one more gorgeous day in Tuscany in the spring, and it's peaceful here. So keep your eyes open. Anybody enjoying anything, be happy. Share the happiness. Let your heart be like at least a swimming pool. Enjoy your day.